Well, there it is. The England team to play Japan this weekend. I did not see the early announcement coming. Steve Borthwick channeling his inner Rassi Erasmus and naming his team 2 days before he needs to and 4 days before the match. But given the fact that this game couldn't even get a TV broadcaster and the fact that it's going to be, well, fairly under the radar with all the other sport going on, quite a good call, I reckon, just for that alone, to get the team out there and hopefully build up some narratives, build up some anticipation for this game. Because my fear was hardly anybody's actually going to watch it. I absolutely will be. I'm excited for it, as I am for all of the international rugby that is coming up in this little July window, well, June and July window this weekend, obviously outside of the official World Rugby International window, but top games nonetheless, and all of it will be covered here on Egg Chasers. I'm Tim. Thank you very much for watching. What do you make of Steve Borthwick's team? Let me know in the comments down below. The other thing to say, as well as being announced early, England are full bore. Steve Borthwick has named as strong a 23-man squad as he can. There is no time for getting players experience. There is no time for experimentation or rotation. And I quite like that. I like that Steve Borthwick has gone, we finished the Six Nations strongly. We're going to keep the momentum going. And more importantly, we want to put ourselves in the best possible position to beat the All Blacks in the All Blacks backyard, which would be huge and a really tough ask. And given the fact that New Zealand are not going to get the chance to play together before they play England, a chance to get together, play together with the team that will, well, very likely run out onto the pitch against New Zealand, it will be mainly this squad. That's a show of intent. Some people will argue, and maybe you have this perspective, that this means that there's not going to be the opportunity to develop some of the young prospects, and where are they going to get game time? I understand that, but for what it's worth, I really like this selection. Let's have a look at the talking points through this game. Firstly, Steve Borthwick versus Eddie Jones. I like this. It's a long relationship these two guys have had. Saracens, when Steve Borthwick was Eddie Jones's captain and he was the head coach. Then Eddie Jones took him under his wing as a coach after his retirement at Japan, at England, and then that's Eddie Jones and Steve Borthwick as well now. Steve, if you strike Eddie down, he'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. There is very much a master-apprentice kind of feel to this one, and I wonder if that's also just... No, actually, do you know what? As the words are coming out of my mouth, I know Steve Borthwick enough to know that is not remotely in his thinking when it comes to why he's selected a really strong team. This is not personal for Steve Borthwick. He's not picking it because he wants to go and get one over on Eddie Jones. Although he and some of the players would love to get one over on Eddie Jones, I'm absolutely sure. First, Steve Borthwick is like as straight down the line and as pro as you can imagine, which is why I was surprised about the announcement being 2 days early. Again, my thinking on that is it's trying to build up some excitement for the game, which, with everything else going on, is just going to be completely off many people's radar, other than die-hard rugby fans. You are clearly a die-hard rugby fan because you're watching this channel, and if you get value from the channel, hit subscribe. Other storylines in this one: front row, Bevan Rodd gets a start. And obviously Ellis Genge would have been starting had he been fit. He's injured. It was interesting to see how it was going to go. Bevan Rodd gets the nod. Finn Baxter's got to wait. He's a young man. He'll have his opportunity at some point. But again, Steve Borthwick has just picked this purely on merit. Who's the next best cab off the rank? And he's gone for Bevan Rodd. He's had a really good season for Sale Sharks. A very mobile player, but his scrummaging is underrated. We're going to see what that's made of at international level over the coming weeks then. And also in the front row where Dan Cole, the Koala Bear, starts on the other side of the scrum. But the two old stagers are still there. 37 years young is Dan Cole, and he's still there in the England team. Some people, what I will say is at some point England have to address the issues that there are at prop. And there are issues, particularly at tight head prop. And England have got to address that and find who is the next guy. Unless Dan Cole could be a 40-year-old playing at the next World Cup, I wouldn't put it past him, but it's unlikely, you would think. Because what we don't want to happen is what happened with scrum half with England, where Ben Youngs kept getting picked. Some would argue on merit or not. I would probably say that he was amazing early in career. Later in his career, it was a bit more hot and cold. Great servant, don't get me wrong, but England had no other option because all they'd done is pick Ben Youngs up to that point. And all you could do, the only other option was Danny Care, who got brought back in. So at some point, England had to pull the trigger on scrum half. I'll get to that in a minute. They've got to do the same thing with props so that we don't arrive at the next World Cup with no one that's got time under their belt at international level. So Joe Marler on the bench and Dan Colton. Something I've mentioned, I remember mentioning this on the channel back in the World Cup. One thing that Steve Borthwick has started doing after that semi-final, in fact, wasn't it, when Cole and Marler started and they did really well against the South African pack. And then we got mullered when they went off. Ever since then, these two guys have not started together. Through the Six Nations, it was always one and then the other one on the bench, so that one of the best scrummagers can always be on the field. I think that's what's going on there. As for second row, the rest of the scrum, Chandler Cunningham South gets his first start, his 6th cap this will be, 21 years of age. It's amazing really, because he's only actually started 16 club matches. He wasn't a starter at London Irish last season, and for most of this season for Harlequins, he hasn't been a starter, but he's been brilliant off the bench. I mean, he's not an 80-minute player yet, but he's got that in him. But when he is on the field, he is destructive. And he will, without Ollie Chesham, it possibly would have been Chesham or Martin on the flank. But Cunningham South got an opportunity to make that 6 jersey his. He is not a replacement for Courtney Laws. He's a very different type of player. He's a ball carrier and destructive on the attacking side of the game. Courtney Laws was a good ball carrier, but just his superpower was defence. But in that England pack, they also have George Martin. And I was in Paris for that semi-final against South Africa, and it felt a little bit at times like, and that picture's kind of fitting, it felt like a passing of the torch from Courtney Laws to George Martin as the defensive totem for England, because George Martin was an absolute machine that day. Defensively, he just wipes people out. He is so hard, and still only 23 years of age. It's frightening how many good young England players there are. And George Martin, really, although he's going to be wearing 4 or 5, I can't remember which number he's got on his back, he's in the second row. He is the replacement for Courtney Laws. And Chandler Cunningham South will do a very different type of job. I'm very excited about the England pack. Behind the scrum, this is my favourite selection. Harry Randall. I said the fact that he was in the squad over Jack Van Portfleet when it looked like it was a choice between those two signified to me that Steve Borthwick was going to build on the attacking play that England had through the Six Nations and was going to try and evolve it and take that on. The fact that Harry Randall is on the bench says that they're going to do that even more so. That I thought the way it was going to work was it was going to be Alex Mitchell the starter, Ben Spencer on the bench, and Harry Randall was there kind of to be the second Alex Mitchell. But actually what this says to me is Alex Mitchell has got a good running game. He can snipe round the base. He's a genuine threat with the ball and just the best scrum half in England. But Harry Randall, it says to me, Alex Mitchell brings tempo and they're going to try and speed it up even more in the last quarter of a match. That selection is the one I'm most excited about, Harry Randall at scrum half. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. Ben Spencer's been brilliant. I'm very, very happy about that Harry Randall selection. As for fly half, what do you think? There was a lot of people, in fact, the majority of the comments, if I'm honest, were saying that Finn Smith should start and Marcus Smith should be on the bench. I totally disagreed with that, and I think the selection that you've gone with is right. There's plenty of time for Finn Smith. I think sometimes we can get too swayed by club form. And the Premiership has been a great competition. It's been excellent this season, and Finn Smith has been fantastic. But it's not international rugby. The time you get in international rugby is so much less, and it does take time to adjust. And Finn Smith has not started international rugby. He's only played half an hour of international rugby. This would have been the game to give him a start if you wanted to give him a start on tour. But clearly Steve Borthwick's like, no, I want to win every single game, so let's get ready for New Zealand. And Marcus Smith is the man. I totally agree with that selection as well. And in the back line, I just think the Henry Slade story is such a good one. I mean, as you'll know if you've been watching the channel for a while, I could not understand why he was not required for the Rugby World Cup. The guy is a Rolls Royce of a rugby player. His tactical kick-in, his outside break, his defensive work's been excellent, and he's just an elite mentality. And he showed that elite mentality after being denied a World Cup squad spot, which he was absolutely devastated about. And he was 30 years of age at the time then. And many other players who were 30, just been snubbed for a World Cup, future's a bit up in the air, lucrative offers coming in from France. A lot of players would have gone and taken the cash abroad. He stayed with Exeter Chiefs, with an Exeter Chiefs squad which no one was expecting to do anything because they were a bunch of kids and Henry Slade. And he has been an absolute warrior for them, a leader. He's played incredibly well, got themselves to a quarter-final of the Champions Cup, 5th or 6th in the Premiership, very close to being in the playoffs anyway. And he's got his England spot back and been absolutely brilliant. I just think Henry Slade is, I mean, what a year he's had. Fair play. And I'm also pleased for Tom Roebuck, who's in line. He's the only player in line to get a debut in this game. And he's had to wait for it, hasn't he? He's been in and around England camp for a while. Again, I think probably the majority of the comments that you'll see online will say Ollie Slightholme should be in. I'm disappointed Ollie Slightholme. And I think quite often the shiny new toy and the person that's playing really well in the Premiership gets all the attention and gets all the buzz. But international rugby is a very, very different beast. And Tom Roebuck is tailor-made for it. He's big. And he's excellent at doing a lot of the basics. His kick chase is as good as any. His defensively, he's really strong. And when he gets a bit of open field, he can let rip. So I'm really pleased for Tom Roebuck. He's sat and waited. He has had Scotland in his ear. He's qualified for Scotland, and he might have been tempted, but he's only a young man. In fact, on the age of the actual squad, just going back to the team there, you can have a look. The average age of this team is 26.4. That's a pretty. I mean, there's some experience in that team when you look down it, but of the starting 15, 26.5, the average age. That's pretty good. Which 3 years' time, that'll be 29 at the Rugby World Cup. That's all right. And the average caps in the starting 15 is 32, which is it's a good place. I'm really genuinely optimistic. I think my prediction, for what it's worth, England are going to grind Japan into dust. I think it'll be tricky and Japan will be spirited. They're not the team they were a few years ago when they beat Scotland and Ireland at a World Cup, when they beat South Africa in 2015. The decline has come in partly because World Rugby's eligibility rules mean it's 5 years, not 3 years, and they haven't been able to get a load of guys from the Japanese league in. But we're going to see what effect the Japanese league, having all these superstars, has on the national team, because they're playing with and in teams with superstars. Can that elevate their performance? How much of a boost can Eddie Jones give the Japanese team? I do think it'll be some, but I think England will win by 25. England by 25. There you go. Maybe I'm a cocky Englishman saying that. Tell me if you disagree. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Tim. This is Egg Chasers. If you get value from the channel, like I say, hit subscribe. And also to make sure you don't miss any of the rugby that's coming up, whether that's URC final, whether that's Super Rugby Pacifica, which is actually on at the same time. It overlaps with that England game, doesn't it? All the international rugby that is coming up on the channel. And I'm also going to flag up FR UK Rugby, another channel that I have started with former England World Cup winner Joe Worsley, covering French rugby from an English-speaking perspective. FR UK Rugby, brilliant interview with Courtney Laws. You can go and see the full thing of there, and loads of other good stuff as well. I'll see you on the next one.